Monday. I call the meeting of the Brainerd City Council to order. Welcome aboard, City Administrator Broyles, to the big, now you're in the big time. Please call the roll.
Johnson.
Here.
Chezak.
Here.
O'Day.
Here.
Stunek. Here. Terry. Here. Stengline. Here. Bevins.
Here.
Badow.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
I think I sing that in my sleep.
Too fast for you? For everyone. It hasn't changed. All right, next up is item number 4, approval of the agenda. Mr. Chezak has asked for the floor. Please make a motion first before any discussion, Mr. Chezak, per our accepted rules.
Okay, I would move that we amend the agenda to remove the picketing ordinance.
Perfect.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Chezak, a second by Stengline. Mr. Chezak.
Yes, there are a few reasons why I think we should remove this. And first, it was the process that we got here was incorrect, as it was a direction from council to staff without a council motion to get this on our agenda for the first reading. And there was also additional information that the council did not receive from Chief Davis that the strike planning work group got that I think is important for everybody to see. And I hope if this does come back that that is included in the packet. Additionally, there's the rights of each council member to be able to ask to see an ordinance come back or to come here in the first place. We're avoiding, by doing it this way, we have eliminated that in our rights as council members. And there's also, and if the process had been followed as it should have been, we would be here tonight asking that whether we want to approve seeing this ordinance for a first reading. And then another thing, as I noted, is that when we rush things, as the mayor has indicated, we usually have controversy. So those are some of the reasons I have for removing this from the agenda. And I do have a second motion if this one passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chezak. Any other comments on the motion? Okay, I would like to make a couple comments, if I may. Number one, I asked this to have staff prepare a motion. And just so you know, the reason why is because this is considered by some to be timely. If we wait 2 weeks, we may have lost an opportunity to create difficulties. Not just, it's really not about us. The people that may or may not have the most problem will be your neighbors. Just so you know, I can't get to my mailbox. I got into name calling. I'm not sure the city of Brainerd is ready for that. Regarding the procedure, you are all getting a chance right now to vote thumbs up or thumbs down on Mr. Chezak's motion. So there is an opportunity for you to speak, to learn. We'd be able to learn from Chief Davis if there's things that we need to know, from Kara Terry, from Jeff Chezak, or any of our staff members. So as you know, for every motion, there's an opportunity for staff to bring us up to speed on the motion. I really don't care if we have the first reading, personally, but I really think it was important for you to get it 2 weeks sooner than Mr. Chezak suggests. I actually hope I'm wrong, to tell you the truth. The other thing, I wanted our city administrator, new up to the dais, to read what it says about the rules of decorum and agenda items.
So it's just a couple sentences here. This is out of the Rules of Decorum, Section 4, Agenda Subdivision 1, under matters for consideration. It says matters for council action shall be submitted by members of the council and residents in writing by 12 o'clock on Tuesday, immediately preceding the city council, to the city administrator or to city staff representatives in the case of committee business. So again, it's up to the council to determine what that means. I would interpret that as any member of the council or any member of the public, if they submit something in writing by noon on Tuesday, can go on the agenda.
So That's right out of the rules of decorum. And again, you get a chance right now to vote thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether you even want to have the reading. So that would be strictly up to you. You know, regarding decorum, if you've never sat in this chair, I've sat and talked to Gabe Johnson numerous times about, can people speak on an issue? And often the answer is yes, as long as we have scheduled a public hearing. Now, the real reason for that, I believe, and the attorneys here, would be to notify people that we're going to be allowing public testimony. But who up here has not thought to themselves, boy, I wish we were allowing people to speak. There's a lot of people here, and I bet they have something to say about an issue, and we can't let them. But sometimes we do let them, which is not always a good idea. But sometimes it is. But in order to be fair, the rule says you have to schedule a public hearing. But who among us hasn't thought to themselves or even voted, I'd like to hear people speak. And we allow them to speak because this is the city of Brainerd and we represent those people. And by golly, if we're not listening to them, then what are we doing up here? So again, I really don't have an issue. If you vote in favor of the motion, you're going to vote to eliminate that, and it's going to put it out 2 weeks, and everything's going to be fine. I didn't want you to think that I was doing this for some self-serving interest. I was not really even doing it for you. I was doing it more for what I thought was best. Let's have, you know what I said, Nick, let's have one ready. Let's see if Kevin Stunick and Kara Terry and Gabe Johnson and Jeff Chesak and Tiffany and Mike are interested in moving this along, maybe too fast, but I think it might be something to at least consider as timely. So sorry to take so long. Mr. Chesak has a motion. It's been seconded by Tiffany. Anybody else wish to speak on it that hasn't spoke? Mr. O'Day.
So we're not necessarily giving our opinion right now on this.
Correct. It's
Just on whether or not we're speaking about the
right.
issue or keeping it on the agenda.
Keeping it on or not. 7 minutes in and we're still approving the agenda.
I have no comment on it then.
Okay. Well, you're going to ask to vote? I think, before I ask for a second round, Jeff, I mean, can I?
Yeah.
I mean, is it, does anybody have a problem with letting, we start a second round? Anybody down here? Okay, Jeff, doesn't seem anybody has a problem. Go ahead.
I appreciate your explanation, and the one thing I would say, though, when you read the rules, it simply says, if you want something on the agenda, what you did was give staff direction to draft an ordinance, which doesn't allow us to say if we want to see it or not. That's why, had we followed the process, we would be here with an agenda item asking us, as the elected officials, do we want to see this ordinance come before us? So that's the big difference between how it was read, how you described it. And there's a distinction. So that's where I had a problem seeing that. As you know, I emailed Nick and said, Kelly directed staff to draft an ordinance, and then we are here at the first reading, where normally we'd have the option as council. I'm just asking that it be removed, and then I would follow up with that. We put it on the agenda to have it if the council wants to see it on the 17th. That would be my following motion if this passes.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just a question. I believe the motion was to approve the agenda without that item.
Yep.
So we're going to then have a.
I asked to
motion
remove that.
Amend the agenda.
Nope.
After it's approved or.
Nope. Well, maybe, but
All
it's
right.
not, it's not going to be to amend the agenda. It's going to be to, I think, Jeff, it's going to be to add it to the 17th, which we don't need that motion, by the way. It can be added on the 17th as long as it comes in a timely manner. You can, I mean.
Thank you, I understand.
Yep. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Jeff, but we really don't need a motion to put it on the 17th. But I think we should. So, anything else? Anything else? All right, let's see if we can get an agenda. The motion is to continue with the agenda as presented minus the one item. Okay? Tony, please call the roll on this.
Johnson?
No.
Chesak?
Yes.
O'Day?
Yes.
Junick?
Yes.
Terry?
No.
Stengline?
Yes.
Bevins?
No, and that motion passes. So we are proceeding with that eliminated. All right, Mr. Chesak?
Then I would move that we add on the agenda discussion if we want to see this back on our agenda on the 17th for a first reading.
Okay, you don't want to put it on, you want to discuss it tonight.
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay, okay.
Do we want to see it back on the 17th?
You were right, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. All right, is there a second to discussion the motion of whether we should have it on the 17th? I'll ask a second time.
Second.
All right, we got a second by Tiffany. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Chesak?
We follow the proper procedure. That's what we'd have before us tonight, is what's going on. If this passes, is what will be on the agenda.
Perfect. Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion is, can we keep it in the same spot?
I think so.
All right? I mean, do we need a motion on what spot it should be on the agenda tonight?
Place it now. That's-
Okay.
That's fine.
So this is replacing the first reading with a discussion on the motion to move this onto the 17th. Hearing none, we'll just do an all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. So now, can we have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Chesak, second by Stengline. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. The motion passes. We have an agenda, and we're 11 minutes in. I thought it would take 20.
Nice guy.
Yeah. All right. Let's do the consent calendar. Item number 5, all matters listed are considered routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the council votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call. Is there a move to adopt the consent calendar?
Second.
Motion by, down here, Chesak or O'Day?
Chesak.
Chesak, second by Stunek. Any discussion? Any discussion? I'll call for a third time. Any discussion? Hearing none. Tony, please call the roll.
Johnson?
Yes.
Chesak?
Yes.
O'Day?
Yes.
Stunek?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Stengline?
Yes.
Bevins?
Yes. The consent calendar is adopted. Item 6 is council committee reports. 6A, Personal and Finance Committee, Chairman Gabe Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 7 items on the agenda tonight, the first of which is to authorize the fire department to apply for a 24-25 armor equipment grant through MN DPS ECN. The motion is to approve the fire department to apply for the 24-25 armor equipment grant through the Minnesota Department of Public Safety Emergency Communication Network, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Stunek. Any discussion? Chairman Johnson.
They'd be asking for, requesting $136,000. There's a 5% match, which would be $6,800, but we have $20,000 budgeted for radios this year, so we'd be saving money if we got this grant.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next up is a motion to accept the resignation of Community Service Officer Richard Berry, effective Monday, June 3rd, 2024, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Terry. Any discussion? Any discussion? We'll ask a third and final time for any discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Okay, next up is to ratify a hiring of Community Service Officer, and the motion is to ratify the hiring of Drew Belton, effective May 29th, 2024, at $20.09 per hour, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Stunek. Any discussion? Any discussion? Asking a third and final time. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next up is a reestablishment of the Transit Operations Specialist position. And the motion has 3 parts. I move to reestablish the Transit Operations Specialist position with the attached updated job description, to approve the Transit Operations Specialist job classification points at 241, and further to authorize staff to negotiate the wage for the Transit Operations Specialist position with the IBEW Administrative Support Union, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Terry. These are all together, Mr.
Yep.
Johnson? Okay, Mr. Johnson.
So we had this position and up until about 18 months ago, and we went a while without it to see if we could make it work without this position. Turns out we could be much more efficient if we did have this position filled, so staff has asked to, post for it and hire somebody. And they do think that the current rate structure and the fees brought in by the transit operations can support this job, so we aren't talking levy dollars or anything.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? We'll ask a third and final time. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next up is to set the pay for election judges. And I don't remember what we set the pay at,
It was what was recommended.
22 and 18. Okay, so I move we adopt the attached resolution setting the wages for election judges at $22 for head and assistant judges and $18 an hour for regular and trainee judges, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Stunek. Any discussion?
Mr. Bevins?
Mr. Chesak.
I just want to thank people who volunteer to do this. We call it volunteering. It is a nominal pay, actually, but it's a heavy duty, and we need these people, and I can't thank them enough, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak. Any further discussion? Second call, any further discussion? Third call, any further discussion? This is a resolution. Tony, please call the roll.
Johnson?
Yes.
Chesak?
Yes.
O'Day?
Yes.
Stunek?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Stingline?
Yes.
Bevins?
Yes. That resolution is adopted. Next up is item 6. Please
Thank
proceed.
you, Mr. President. This is a loan subordination agreement, and the motion is to authorize the signature on the subordination agreement, whereas the city retains a second position on the mortgage for 1614 Laurel Street, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Terry. Chairman Johnson.
We are currently in the second position on this mortgage. They received a SCDG loan through the city almost 10 years ago, and it's forgivable at 10% per year. So the loan will be fully forgiven this August, but they're refinancing or something, so Bremer Bank needs us to sign the subordination agreement to remain in second place.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Final call. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The final item is to authorize the police department to apply for a traffic safety enforcement grant. And the motion is to authorize the police department to apply for the traffic safety enforcement grant from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, Office of Traffic Safety, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, second by Stunek. Any discussion? Second call. Any discussion? Third and final call. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
End of report.
Thank you very much. Next up is item 6B, Safety and Public Works Committee Chairman Mike O'Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. We just had 5 items on safety and public works tonight. First of which was a change order request for improvement 2115 Buffalo Hills Gully remediation. Motion coming out of committee was to recommend the approval of the change order request as presented in the amount of $6,150.16, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, second by Chesak. Any discussion? Chairman O'Day.
Cost was for a few manhole covers that needed to be raised to fit in with the grading of the gully. Cost is as presented.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Third and final call. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next one is a change order request for improvement 22-08 South Brainerd reconstruction. Motion coming out of committee was to recommend approval of the change order request as presented in the amount of $6,682.52. I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Chesak. Any discussion? Mr. O'Day.
This is just a few things that had to happen for the sidewalk to go in or be replaced. A few different retaining walls that had to be taken down and put back up, relocating a shed, parking lot storm line repair. If you want more detail on it, you can ask Mr. Dean.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Final call, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next was informational item on tree knockdown cost recovery. Staff presented us with kind of what we typically do now. We don't necessarily, as we are now, we don't necessarily pursue insurance when cars take out trees, say on College Drive or anywhere else on our boulevards and right-of-ways. But it does happen a lot. Vandalism, if we catch them in the act, we do pursue that criminally. It was just a discussion point. We were trying to see where we're at, but there was a motion that came out of this. And the motion was to direct staff to pursue reimbursement for the trees within the right-of-way that are struck or destroyed by insured vehicles. And I so move.
Second.
Sorry.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Stingline. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say I
Chesak.
appreciate Tiffany thinking of this. I think it's a good idea, and I hope it works out.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Last call, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next was our vacant building registry ordinance, and the motion was to direct staff to bring it back to the next city council meeting to conduct the first reading, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Chesak. Any discussion? Mr. O'Day.
I'm sure you guys all read through it. It's a few pages long of really interesting material. The biggest thing is, what we're trying to do here is encourage vacant building owners to either fix or repair their maintenance issues or sell the house or commercial building, whatever it may be. The sticking point is probably going to be the number that we put on it, which is $7,000. It's to be on that, but that's something that they can work with staff. If they're working on the house, if they start to repair the house, we can forgive that. But this gets their attention to pay $7,000 or do something. So this is something that is modeled after a Minneapolis ordinance that they've had success with. So I think it's time to get it going here.
Thank you.
Not that we want to be like Minneapolis, I'm just saying that that worked there.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted to say thank you for this particular item, just because I've had a couple discussions lately with a few residents about just houses that appear to pop up in the area and why that happens. And I think, James, you've kind of said that a lot of times what happens is a relative dies, and then the people that either inherit or have that house come to them are not interested in it. And that seems to be the case, but it seems like we're getting one or two of them a year. And it's just an interesting dilemma that has popped up in the last couple of years, and getting ahead of it is a good idea.
Thank you. We've had 3 calls for discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next was just direction on active code enforcement cases. This was a case at 320 8th Street North for junk and debris. Motion coming out of committee was to issue an order to correct letter and obtain a search warrant to abate the nuisance at 320 8th Street North. And I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Chesak. Any discussion? Chairman O'Day.
Mr. Kronvik did inform us that they have cleaned most of this up already, but there is at least one mattress laying on the lawn still. So we went forward and went ahead with the motion anyway, just to make sure that it does get fully cleaned up.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Last call. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please proceed.
End of report.
Thank you very much. Next up is 7, unfinished business. 7A is the resignation of Troy Rushmeyer. Jesse Dean, anything you want to add to what's in our packet? From the Park Board.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. So at the May 28th Park Board meeting, Park Board member Rushmeyer announced his resignation from the Park Board. Staff is recommending to accept with regret his resignation and to begin accepting applications for the open seat on the Park Board effective June 4th.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the resignation with regret by Chesak? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by O'Day. Any discussion? Second call, any discussion? Mr. Mayor.
I just want to say thank you to Troy for all of his hard work. Troy was with us for quite a few years and went through the long process of evaluating all our parks and really this uptick in the amount of time that the Park Board has been spending lately, and I really want to thank him for that. I had some really good discussions with him about where we go in the future and where we've been, and I think for him, he just said, you know, he's got other things that he's interested in as well. And sometimes these seats take a lot of your time. So I really want to thank him for the time that he put in and helping us get to where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last call, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is 7 unfinished business B, call for applicants. Mr. Mayor, you're up first.
Well, I know you just said, you know, next meeting, but I'm going to put it right up here. We got a seat on the Park Board available now. So number 1, call for applicants, Park Board. 1 term expiring sometime in some year. Also, we have the Charter Commission, 2 terms expiring 2026, 2 terms expiring 2025. Transportation Advisory Committee, 2 terms expiring 2026. We also have the Economic Development Authority, 1 term expiring 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as council president, I have 2 terms on the Parking Commission, 1 to expire in 2026 and 1 to expire in 2028. Next up is 7 unfinished business. 7C is the final reading of and public hearing on proposed ordinance 1565, short-term rentals. Mr. Kramvik, anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So changes to the proposed ordinance. The last time City Council reviewed this a few months ago was removal of the cap limits and individual property owner from operating no more than 1 VDU in the city. Increase the city's total cap from 20 VDU short-term rentals to 40 short-term rentals while restricting 20 to the Main Street District and 20 to the Town Center District, allowing up to 2 short-term rental units in 4+ unit buildings. And all multifamily dwellings with 3+ units or less shall contain no more than 1 short-term rental at any given time. This also removed the need for the grandfather clause for existing short-term rentals. A few of the unchanged items in all other zoning districts, there shall be no more than 10 total VDUs permitted at any given time. And all short-term rentals operating prior to the effective date of these standards shall be compliant with this section by December 31st, 2025. We had a few that were previously grandfathered in. I think council was interested in still having that in there to make sure everybody's applied the same rules. So with that, the public hearing was conducted at the Planning Commission, so there's no public hearing tonight. So with that, staff recommends to conduct the final reading of proposed ordinance 1565 and dispense with the actual reading. Note, a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous, and to approve proposed ordinance 1565 pertaining to short-term rentals. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. So let's start with questions from the council to staff. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. You outlined the changes in the proposed ordinance that are different than the proposed ordinance, however many proposed ordinances we've shot down in the past. What are the changes in the proposed ordinance from the actual ordinance that we actually have in place and follow right now?
So I would say, you know, what you're seeing in the changes to the proposed ordinance would also be considered changes from the kind of what we have right now.
So we have a grandfather clause right now?
We don't have a grandfather
clause. Okay, so
clause.
that's not in the current ordinance?
Yep.
Do we have a cap that sets an individual property owner from owning more than 1 in the ordinance right now?
We do not.
We don't. So what is this is different than our current ordinance?
Yep, so the biggest things that is different from our current ordinance would be a cap of 40, capping 20 to the Main Street Town Center District. There's no cap currently within our ordinance. So that'd be one change, allowing up to 2 short-term rental units in 4+ unit buildings. Right now, you could theoretically have as many short-term rentals as you wanted in an apartment. So that's in there. And then one of the other big ones would be that all short-term rentals operating prior to the effective date of these standards shall be compliant with this section by December 31st of 2025. Right now, we have a few that were grandfathered in as it became interim use permits because they were homeowner owned or homeowner occupied. They didn't need the interim use permit. And then the other part would be you're only allowed one per platted block, one building, and then they can't be abutting each other. So that was added as well. Those would be the primary changes.
Okay, one more question, Mr. President.
Mr. Johnson, you have the floor.
Oh, and I forgot it. Well, it wasn't that
If it
important,
comes
I
back,
guess.
you let us know. We're pretty good at allowing round two.
Okay, I'll be ready.
All right. Any other questions of staff? Any other questions of, Mr. Johnson?
I thought
round
it-
two.
So is it still an IUP?
It
With
was
the
an
new
IUP
ordinance?
and is still an IUP.
Okay,
That's
thank
correct.
you. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions of staff? Okay. First item would be to conduct the final reading of proposed ordinance 1565, dispense with the actual reading, and a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous. Motion by Stengline, second by Chesak. Any discussions on the motion?
I don't want to sit here all night listening to the thing be read to us. This was not too bad.
Okay. I have to be, I'm with you on that. Any further discussion on the final reading of proposed ordinance 1565? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Next up is the approval, and just to note, Mr. Kramvik, as Mr. Kramvik said, the public hearing was held at Planning and Zoning. So, the next item is to approve the proposed ordinance 1565 pertaining to short-term rentals. Is there a move to approve?
So moved.
Or
Second.
to adopt?
Yes. Yes.
Second.
Motion by Stengline, second by Chesak. Any discussion? But just a comment, I'm voting in favor of the motion, but I think it's a little bit like a 170 mile an hour speed limit. If it really hit some of these limits, I think we were probably just as good with nothing. But what the heck, a little bit of something is better than nothing. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Let's call the roll. Tony?
Johnson?
Yes.
Chesak?
Yes.
O'Day?
Yes.
Stunek?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Stingline?
Yes.
Bevins?
Yes, that ordinance is adopted. Next up is item D. Consider the sound review report documents for proposed crypto mining outdoor storage facility. Mr. Kramvik, this is your item. Anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So at the last meeting, City Council asked staff to extend the review period for the interim use permit for VCV at 1918 TC Drive, and also had asked staff to create a sound report for City Council for review. So with that, staff is looking for direction from City Council as how to proceed with the sound report. Staff proposes the following items: a report from VCV detailing expected decibel levels based on distance and time of year. Staff will review and comment on the report and calculations. I have already run some of my own calculations on that. Case studies from other municipalities with crypto mining facilities, preferably those with immersion technology. Decibel readings at the Just for Crypto Mining facility and accompanying observations of sound impact on surrounding properties. Again, this one's not a perfect representation of what that one would be. This one uses probably less outdoor mining machines, but also louder mining machines, similar megawatts. So there's differences, not a perfect comparison, but there is something in our city to compare it to. Also, a YouTube video with sound displaying the difference between open air mining and immersion mining. I do know that an email was sent to council members kind of asking for some additional documentation. One thing that staff would be including in a recommendation is a report from VCV regarding potential hazardous materials such as the dialect fluids involved in immersion cooling and how VCV would intend to dispose of such waste. A report regarding hazardous materials would be good to include within the interim use permit. Potential condition to an interim use permit would be that they are required to follow all state and federal regulations for handling, disposal, and reporting leaks and spills for hazardous materials. Violations could result in termination of the IUP. I can certainly also reach out to the MPC RFP to see if there's any additional requirements. But just kind of as a reminder, there are many industrial uses that also utilize hazardous materials. But in the allowed use section, it is common to have this type of report. So with that, staff recommends approval of the required report documents with the addition of the hazardous material plan, and that the city council should reconsider the IUP after all documents have been reviewed and collected by staff. I'm unsure if this would be at the next council meeting or the one after that, but I am beginning to collect some of this information.
Thank you, Mr. Kravik. Any questions of staff regarding the recommendation? Kara Terry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, James, for including some of the things I was going to recommend, including the MPCA, following up on that. I have some questions related to the documents, and I don't believe you'll be able to answer them tonight, so this would also fall in the further research category, is the way I'm prefacing this.
Sure. Would you like to state them now?
I would, please.
Yep, you're up.
So in the letter, in the EDA packet related to the sale or the selling the 100% of the membership interests in VCV, would that then constitute Anchang Holdings as the new owner, since they're owning 100% of the membership interests? So if you could follow up on that, that would be great. And then in terms of the timeline, I have a couple questions related to the zoning variance information. If we look at the zoning variance documentation, the 515-5 rules and administration, and we look at, sorry, Mr. President,
It's okay.
page 129, under variances C, the applicant shall supply proof of ownership or equitable ownership interest as applicable, supply documented authorization, yada, yada. So that fits into my initial request to understand who the exact owners will be. The second section is the lapse of variance. So section D, under 515-5-4, number 3, the request for extension states facts demonstrating that a good faith attempt has been made to complete or utilize the variance that has been granted. And number 5, the extension shall not exceed 90 days from the initial variance expiration date. If we could have a timeline related to that as well. I hope that makes sense. If not, I can follow up with an email.
I think following up with an email is a good idea.
Do you think so? Okay.
And then James can answer to all of us.
Okay, cool. I'll follow up with some additional questions that I have then at that time as well. But those are some of the things that are floating through my head right now that I would appreciate a review of.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Tiffany?
I think I'm going to ask it as a question rather than maybe fiddle with the motion. Would you consider this to be an exhaustive list of the things that you would send us, or if you found something else that you thought we should know? I want to make sure that you feel comfortable sending us some other little thing that doesn't fit into these parameters.
Yeah, so this is, specifically related to the sound report that council is asking for. Some of those other things can certainly be clarifications the next time the IUP comes, and I've tried to answer as many of those questions as possible. And, we can continue to have questions on kind of the rules and procedures for it and answer those. This is kind of an idea of what exactly council's looking at for the sound report. So this would be staff's recommendation for the required documents. And I do think this is a pretty extensive list. I did, there was another portion that was questioned whether or not, an engineering report should be done, to send out an RFP in time to, get something like that done, could prove difficult. I know one of the more subjective things with the sound report is you certainly can do calculations based on, maximum potential running speeds of these cooling fans. How much are these cooling fans how much are they going to be running in wintertime, springtime, and, this spring is different than last spring. So those things are a little bit more subjective and would probably be difficult to put into a report. Did that?
Tiffany?
I think that answered my question.
Excellent. Any other questions of staff? Any other? Mr. Chesak?
Yeah, I'm kind of asking this for everybody's sake, our 60 days is from May 20th, correct? That's when we had this extension. Is that correct?
Let me bring up
Cranley?
the letter that was sent.
Was from the letter?
Take me 1 second to pull that up here.
Our action was on the last meeting.
So it's based on when the application came in. So that's when you have the 60 days, and then we extended it another 60 days from the application date. So within the letter that was sent to VCV, it's now 120 days that City Council would have from the application date to review the interim use
What is
permit.
that deadline? What's the end date on that? From today?
July 30th.
July 30th?
July 30th.
Okay, so, and if we don't have a decision by then to either approve this IUP or deny it, what happens?
Then typically it would just be granted if a decision wasn't made to approve or deny.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Any further questions of staff? Hearing none, staff is recommending the approval of the required report documents and that the city council should reconsider the interim use permit after all documents have been reviewed and collected by staff. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Terry, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Stingline. Any discussion? Mr. Johnson?
I'll be voting no. I voted no on the 60-day extension. I voted no on doing this, so I still oppose it. I think we should have just issued the permit last time. I think we're wasting many fine people's time with delaying this when I would bet money that we're just going to issue the permit eventually anyway.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Second call, any further discussion? And final call. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries. Where are we now? Next up is item 7E, the strike contingency work group update. This is Mr. Broyles. Oh,
Thank you,
welcome to the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. A little out of sorts up here, but I'm going to try to get through this. This is the same brief. It's going to be a brief update. I gave it to the the BPU Commission as well. Just by way of review, City Council did create this strike contingency committee on April 22nd, just really to look at operational preparedness in the event of a strike at BPU. The team has been made up of myself, the HR director, 2 City Council members, 2 Public Utility Commission members, and we've been meeting twice a week since April 30th. We did take off a couple days, just get caught up on staff work. There's a lot of due outs and people had to do a lot of work. I do want to say staff has very aggressively been leaning into this and working very hard at City Hall, over at BPU. Everybody's putting a lot of effort into this and we want to produce a good product. So essentially we were getting reports as part of these bi-weekly meetings. We had representatives from Public Utility Finance, IT Operations, Hydro, Electrical, Water and Wastewater, as well as Human Resources and Emergency Services. That was a meeting we had with some county staff as well. So we had them all come in, talk about kind of current operations, where do we have some exposure if a strike occurs, and how can we best mitigate that risk. Staff is right now aggregating all that information. Our hope is to have a final document substantially complete by the second week of June. As I sit here, I still think that's very aggressive, but we're going to work toward that end. And we hope to have, and we talked as a group, in fact, today at our meeting today, and we kind of as a group have agreed that the substance of a well-written document is probably a little bit more important than the urgency. So we want to, if we don't make that second week of June, we're going to work toward it, but we want to make sure we produce a good document rather than just produce something quickly. So I will certainly answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions of staff on the strike contingency work group update? You're off the hook. All right, next up is thank you very much. Next up is item 8, new business. 8A is the first reading of proposed ordinances 1567 and 1568, cannabis and off-sale liquor. This is Mr. Krambeck. Anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So this is the first readings for proposed orders 1567 and 1568. Part of it is the Planning Commission's purview in the zoning code of the allowed use section pertaining to time, manner, and place. And then the second part was reviewed by PNF regarding the licensing number of cannabis dispensaries that could be allowed within the city of Brainerd. So as proposed, the new commercial dispensaries would be allowed in commercial zoning districts and would be required to be located, new ones would be required to be located at least 100 feet from a school, residential treatment facility, or an attraction with a public park that is regularly used by minors, including playground or athletic fields. This is part of what was in the state regulations that cities can do. A CUP would be required for new dispensaries within 300 feet of the same facility. So if it's between 100 and 300, would require a conditional use permit. Also, the commission recommended that off-sale liquor be removed from the TN2 neighborhood district to align with the sale of adult use cannabis. The city council directed staff at the May 20th meeting to draft a proposed ordinance, which is 1568, allowing a maximum of 2 retail dispensaries in Brainerd and to charge the maximum allowable registration fee of $500 and a renewable registration fee of $1,000. So with that, the first recommendation is conduct the first reading of proposed ordinance 1567 and dispense with the actual reading. And then the second recommended action would be conduct the first reading of proposed ordinance 1568 and dispense with the actual reading, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Krambeck. Any questions of staff? Mr. Chesak?
Thank you. I'm not clear on this. I was going to email you, but is my understanding we are allowed up to 2 of these based on our population, and the county is allowed 6? And if that's correct, do our 2 take up 2 of the county's 6?
Yes, it would. So the county would have to, I'm not sure what they're allowed to do ordinance-wise, if they can maybe not allow any more retail dispensaries in the county if they've reached their 6. But I've been following more of the municipality side of things. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chesak, anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Chairman O'Day?
Wasn't it that we were required to do at least 1 or 2 of these, not that we were limited to?
So the city is required to have 2. If the county, all the municipalities in the county or county retail dispensaries reach 6, the city of Brainerd would not have to issue another one. Direction that I had received from PNF that we just allow up to that 2 and then essentially stop.
I do have another.
Yeah, you're up,
follow-up
Mr. O'Day.
question. Are we sure that, since this does affect some liquor licensing, are we sure this does not affect any current businesses in operation?
So from what I've accounted for, there was the one on Mill Avenue. I believe that building's for sale now. That was a TN2 district. It doesn't affect gas stations that are selling, say, 3.2. This would be for liquor licenses, so that's different than a full liquor store. So I believe that one was one of them. If there are any of them, they'd become legal non-conforming. It would mean they couldn't expand or add on to the building. But from what I did an assessment, I believe that was the only one.
So they have that building for sale that it would affect. Is it currently still in operation, or is it?
I don't believe it's in operation. I was called about that building today, actually, for a different use. They would have, if it's vacant, they'd have essentially 1 year to keep that designation to open as a liquor store again.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff? Any further questions of staff? Okay. So first up is the first reading of proposed ordinance 1567. And that is an ordinance amending section 515-3 of the zoning code. Note that a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous. Is there a motion to conduct the first reading of proposed ordinance 1567?
And dispense with the actual.
And dispense with the actual reading. We have a motion by Stingline, a second by Chesak. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. First reading passes unanimously. The second part of this is to conduct the first reading of proposed ordinance 1568 and dispense with the actual reading. Note that a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous. Is there a motion to hold the first reading of proposed ordinance 1568?
So moved.
Motion by Stegline, is there a second? Second by O'Day. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes unanimously. Next up is the discussion on restricting residential picketing. Mr. Chesak, this is your agenda item. Give us the issue as you see it. You wanted to discuss it.
It's on there to see if the council wants to have brought back at the 17th at our next meeting, the first reading of the ordinance that we were provided with.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Chesak? Any questions of Mr. Chesak? Hearing none, we're looking for a motion. Mr. Johnson?
I'd move to direct staff to bring back the same ordinance next meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion by Johnson. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Stunek. We have a motion to bring this back for the first reading in 2 weeks. Any discussion? Mr. O'Day?
I don't like this ordinance. I think it looks terrible. The optics of this ordinance. We're protecting ourselves. Anytime you see that from the outside, that is not a good look. I think it's overstepping something that we see might be a problem at some point, and I don't think it's gonna happen. Maybe I'm wrong.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Cara Terry?
I agree with Councilmember O'Day. I appreciate the president's reasoning behind bringing it forward related to the neighbors. It's hard to balance the neighbors' rights versus the First Amendment rights of picketers, and I would have to go with the picketers and the ability to be able to picket where they choose to do so. So I'll be voting no.
Perfect. Any further discussion?
Mr. Bevan?
Mr. Chesak?
Yeah, I actually kind of think this was a knee-jerk reaction to bring this forward like we did, and I cannot support it for the same reasons that Councilmember Terry and O'Day mentioned.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ask us third and final time. Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor?
I agree with Kara and with Mike. I fully support people's right to picket, and I welcome it. I absolutely welcome it. I think that if you want your voice to be heard, you should be going to the people that your voice should be heard to. So I fully support your right to picket wherever you so choose, and I'll get some donuts ready for my neighbor if that happens to be the case.
We have a roll call vote, Mr. Bevis.
I think that's a good idea. Any further discussion? Hearing none. I'm sorry, the motion is to bring it back in 2 weeks for the first reading. So if you're against it, vote no. Okay? Tony?
Johnson?
Yep.
Chesak?
No?
O'Day?
No.
Stunek?
Yes.
Terry?
No.
Stengline?
No.
Bevins?
I'll vote no as well. And so we're not going to see it in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chesak.
Thank you.
Next up is the public forum. This is time allocated for citizens to bring. What's that? Oh, nah, I don't want to do that. All right, next up is 8, new business. Consider updating the rules of decorum. Mr. Administrator, what do you got on this?
Kelly almost.
I'm a glutton for punishment. Thank you, Mr. President. So I put this in there. There's obviously been some discussion tonight on the rules of decorum. I just want to bring some attention to this. I am not here to suggest if something is right or wrong. I just want to point out a couple things and confirm from council if this is in fact the way we want to proceed. The one issue that I did put in the agenda item is under Section 9 communication. It states the mayor and council member email communications should be directed either to the city administrator or to a department head copying the city administrator. Again, it's open to interpretation. I would interpret that as elected officials should only be communicating with the city administrator or the department heads. If council would like something other than that, staff will respond appropriately. If in fact we want to maintain this rule, if you will, perhaps this should be broadened to include in any correspondence such as emails, phone calls, et cetera. there's an argument on either way. If you go on one extreme, it kind of slows the process of government down. On the other extreme, if you're only dealing with department heads and city administrators, then the department heads, they're not going to be blindsided by anything, and they can staff projects from the council appropriately. I took it one step further and identified by title the positions that I would consider city administrator and department heads. And the only other thing I wanted to bring up is something that came up earlier in the meeting under that agenda subdivision 1. There was some discussion about how can something get onto the agenda? Can a single council member get something on the agenda, or does it have to come from the majority vote of the council? So I just want to reread those two sentences one more time and just ask for clarification from council. For matters for consideration for the agenda, it says that they shall be submitted by members of the council and residents in writing by noon on the Tuesday immediately preceding city council to the city administrator or city staff representatives in the case of committee business. I would interpret that as if an individual council member sends me an email in writing, says put this on the agenda, that we put it on the agenda. But I just want clarification from council.
Thank you. Any questions of staff on the issue? Mr. Johnson?
I'm confused at how we would bring the city administrator into a phone call. So do we have to do like party line calls every time we want to talk to a department head?
No, sir. If you guys wanted to go this route, I would just suggest, if we want to follow this route, that if you want something done by staff, you either contact me or the department head, and then we'll staff it appropriately from then.
Okay, so from a real world example, Nick, there was some field maintenance issues. I called you and you were jumping into a meeting and you said, can I just have Jesse handle this and call you back? That would still be appropriate and within these rules of decorum.
As I read them, yes.
Right.
But again, this is open to interpretation, and that's the council's job. So staff will adjust to whatever council
Because
wants.
if somebody wants to interpret that, it has to be the city administrator and the finance director on the line. We'd have to find a time where you both aren't in meetings or busy, just to call and say, hey, we forgot to get a police department grant request on the agenda. But Connie could still just call me with that.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Actually, based on what just happened this evening, you couldn't. You would need approval of the whole council to get that request on the agenda. So basically, you're also amending the part about any council member, any citizen can bring something to the agenda. Mr. Chesak, questions of staff?
Yes and no, but I would disagree what you just interpreted there. There's a difference between asking for something on the agenda and giving staff direction to draft an ordinance. That's the distinction. And that's the third time now I've heard you say that. I just want to, do you disagree with me? I mean, I don't know if you see it the same way I do. I mean, it's so.
I was referring more to Mr. Johnson's statement, not to what happened this evening.
Well, that's what you
Procedurally
referenced.
what happened this evening, but Mr. Johnson was specifically giving direction to staff regarding a grant, in your a grant. So I was responding to Mr. Johnson.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
It's best to clarify.
No.
Okay.
But I did have a question.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, in the same nature as what Mr. Johnson was referring to, a phone visit or an in-person visit. I don't know if you all had a chance to read the email that I sent. This is, I understand that our administrator and even our department heads want to keep in the loop on things. And I think for the most part, that's been done pretty effectively. But where I have a little bit of a trouble is there's other staff that aren't on that list. And, I oftentimes speak to people in the city on the staff that aren't department heads. I mean, I called Public Utilities and I talked to a nice lady out there, and I couldn't tell you her name if my life depended on it, but I asked her to describe the bill to me. And, obviously that's not a department head. I've talked to the transit coordinator numerous times. And I put that in the memo. It's like, am I now relegated to only talking to Jesse because the transit coordinator is not a department head? And then, You know, Jesse gets literally paid almost 3 times as much. Is that an efficient, effective way to use staff and if I'm using time? So there's a number of things I put in there. For instance, like if I talk to Trent Hawkinson or Charlie Gammon at Public Utilities, are we now required to have Patrick go ask those guys the question or get the information from them I'm looking for? Because, I mean, Patrick or even perhaps our next Public Utilities Director is probably not going to have the knowledge that either one of these guys have. So now it's got to be transferred back in one form or another, either a phone call or an email. And so there's a lot of additional staff time, and that's kind of where we're bogging down. And if there's got to be some type of report back to Nick or oral and writing, as I put in my email, I'm not sure how we do that. That's why I thought, for the most part, a phone call is very difficult to track. And honestly, I understand where Nick's coming from. Nobody wants to be blindsided. I fully understand it, and I would never expect somebody to know or have understanding of a communication they weren't involved in. And so I would never, kind of be upset with somebody because they weren't privy to some information that I called Connie and I got some information and Nick didn't know about it because she didn't share that with him. And somehow down the line, a week or two later, I'm asking Nick about it and he doesn't know. Well, that's because you can't, I kind of feel like we're trying to make sure our administrator is in the loop on everything when I don't know if that's literally possible on certain instances. I understand why you'd want to be, no doubt about that. I understand that. But I think in the real world, there's other things that go on that aren't necessary for any administrator to know or any public utilities director to know or Jesse to know exactly maybe what Crystal talked to me about for transit. It's maybe I asked for a ridership information or a policy question or I had a concern riding the bus. There's numerous things. So that's where I'm a little concerned with this request by Nick. If there is a problem, I haven't necessarily heard that identified here tonight. So that's, if I heard there's a real problem somebody's having, I'd be all in favor of adjusting whatever rules we needed to follow, but I haven't heard that unless I'm mistaken.
I missed your question for staff.
Well, I might not add one.
All right.
Well,
Okay.
guys,
So it appeared you were speaking against the motion that hasn't been made
In
yet.
that regard, what's the problem? Can you please identify the problem as you see it then, Nick?
Mr. President, may I?
Yes, there, we have a question of staff. Mr. Broyles.
So, Mr. Chesak, staff isn't here to impose requirements on council. That is not our role. You guys impose requirements on us. My only suggestion is if Section 9, if this communication, if this is correct as written, then we just need to amend the rules of decorum. Because in this section, it says the mayor and council will email either the city administrator or a department head copying the administrator. So if we want to deviate from that, that's entirely up to council and staff will respond. It's not for us to impose requirements on council. We will respond to what council wants.
Mr. O'Day, questions of,
So
we're not discussing a motion,
no,
just questions of staff on the intent.
okay. Can I ask it?
Yes? Just wanted to clarify.
Can any citizen of Brainerd call City Hall and ask for staff? I agree with this, but if any citizen of Brainerd can call and ask to talk to Chris or anybody in her department or anybody in any department, but then all of a sudden you get elected to represent those people and you can't, that seems kind of backwards, I no matter what we do going forward, I definitely plan on just copying you in every email, and I usually only speak to department heads about city issues anyway. But at the same time, if I'm sharing a property line with the city engineer, and we can go all winter without seeing each other out there, but now it's nice out, and I see him out there doing his landscaping plans, and we start talking about landscaping and paint color, and maybe a little city stuff, do I have to then put you on speaker?
Mr. President, may I?
You may.
So I feel like I'm not advocating for a position. I understand your point completely. All I'm saying is, if we want to continue that way, which I think we probably should, we either need to change this or just let common sense prevail and just conduct business as usual. and staff will respond either way. I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just pointing out the discrepancy in the rules of decorum as they're written and as we are practicing things in reality. I'm fine with that if that's what council wants to do. I really am. I'm not advocating for a position one way or the other.
Yeah. I just as a point of discussion, Mr. President,
Sure.
I think we should all try to include the city administrator in as much communication as humanly possible with all of our staff, not even just department heads, but limiting our communication to just department heads when we live around all of our employees and live with our neighbors as employees. I think we got to keep that realistic as well, but do our best to, with common sense, include the city administrator.
And but we gotta ask the council, you get to have the last word. I won't forget about you. In that orange shirt.
Always on a timer.
Any other questions of staff? Any other questions of staff? Any other questions of staff? Mr. Mayor.
So, kind of to follow up with Mike, just a real-world question, obviously. So my job is to run events for the city, and I oftentimes have to connect with either street staff or park maintenance. And so my question would just be, outside of the realm, kind of like Mike was saying, outside of the realm of my council responsibilities, I often have reasons to contact lower members of staff without telling Jesse, hey, I'm contacting the street department to ask for a barricade that we've already talked about. I just want to make sure that I'm not crossing lines then when I'm doing that. So I do understand what you're saying, that potentially that, as is written, then creates a problem.
Anything to add? No, sir. All right. Any other discussion? Questions of staff? So what staff is recommending is to motion to modify the rules of decorum to capture the above intent. Does anybody wish to make a motion on this evening? I will ask a second time, and I will ask a third and final time. That issue dies for lack of a motion. We will move on now to item 9, public forum. Time allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the council. We'd like to see you keep it to 3 to max 5 minutes. Anybody who wishes to bring forth something that we haven't discussed this evening, now is your time. It's 8:37, and I will open the public forum. If you're online, please hit *3. That will show us that you're interested in speaking. *6 will unmute you. And if you're online or in the audience, we'd like to have you give us your name and address because we're on TV. So the public forum is open. I will ask a second time, anybody in the audience or online that wishes to speak on an item that is currently not on the agenda this evening. And we will, please come forward, state your name and address, and let us know what you're thinking.
My name is Glennis Teesey. Hello again to you all.
Sure. And your address, Glennis?
Well, I own property at 11374 County Road 45.
Okay. Can we mail you there? Can we send a letter there?
You could.
Okay.
My brother lives there, and he would bring it to me. If you want my mailing address.
Yeah, mailing address.
9212 County Road 45.
Perfect. What's on your mind this evening?
I wanted to thank you for those of you that I have spoken with. I've spoken with Tiffany. I've emailed with Mike. I've talked with Kara, tried to reach Kevin. Thank you for the work that you do, for interacting with me, for responding to me. It shows empathy, which is very important because even though it seems like a waste of time, it is very important to us.
It's on the agenda, Kelly.
No, it was not. It's for me to say thank you.
Yeah, I'll allow it. I mean, if you'd like to move that it's out of order, you can, but please continue.
I was reading through the comprehensive plan, and I apologize, I don't know the etiquette for this process, and so I may fumble and I may say things out of order. But I do have a question. When you consider...
You can't ask questions.
Oh, I can't?
Nope, this is your time to
Okay.
tell the council what you think. Come on in tomorrow after 7:30, ask all the questions you want.
Okay, that being clarified,
Yep. And you can't
I think
talk about any additional information that we're needing for crypto mining this evening because that was
I'm
on
not
the
going to
agenda.
say that word.
Okay. Perfect. Just wanted to make sure that was Mr. Johnson's.
No, what's most important is I wanted to say thank you for hearing us. And I wanted to say, I started reading the comprehensive plan, very well written. I like the goals in there, and I like what's written in addition to the goals, the reasoning behind it, the community focus. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else who wishes to add their thoughts to something that's not on the agenda this evening? I'll ask you.
Oh, I was just looking at Mark.
Okay. I'm going to ask a last time, a final time. And it's 8:40, and we will close the public forum. We're going to turn to staff reports. We'll start on my right to the fire chief, Chief Holmes.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Anything from the police department?
Yes, Mr. President, couple items. Want to make council aware that I did meet with the Crow Wing County Community Services homeless response team today and got an update over regarding their efforts over the last month. They continue to work with the homeless individuals, primarily in the Brainerd and Baxter area, providing not only housing support, but substance abuse support and mental health support. And over the last month, they've been able to find housing for 4 individuals now. And so we're seeing some good progress there. And they reported that our River Landing encampment area is, there's approximately 9 individuals that are down there right now, and they're continuing to work with those individuals. There was also an encampment identified in northwest Brainerd that was on private property. And myself and Community Development Director Kramvik have spoken with the property owner today and insisting on getting that encampment moved off of that private property. And second item I wanted to report is we've been seeing an increase in vandalism lately, and it's not too uncommon this time of year with school coming to an end, weather getting nice. And we've been seeing vandalism, some graffiti, and we have implemented a targeted enforcement initiative at the police department. And this weekend, our officers did catch 2 juveniles committing damage within the city. The damage they caused was pretty significant to where it rose to a felony level offenses, and the 2 juveniles were taken into custody and booked into a juvenile detention center. So I guess any local youths out there that may be listening to this and be aware that that property damage can add up and can be some pretty significant consequences. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Anything from the IT GIS department, Mr. Strong?
Nothing tonight.
All right, let's hop to online. Eric Charpentier from the Brainerd HRA.
Nothing this evening.
Thank you very much. Connie Hillman from the Finance Department.
Yes, filings for city offices closes tomorrow, June 4th at 5:00 p.m. So if you want to be on the ballot, or you need to file before tomorrow at 5:00 p.m.
Thank you. Jesse Dean, our City Engineer, Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. One quick item. So staff did meet with Crow Wing County staff this afternoon to discuss the areas north of the Mississippi River regarding the initial drafts of the municipal boundaries as part of the potential orderly annexation agreement. Staff will bring some updates to the council at the next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Kramvik from the Community Development Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few items here. So the next EDA meeting will be held this Thursday. The EDA will hear a presentation from Alexandria on their outreach efforts for a major road construction project that they had through their town, to try to create some ideas for what Brainerd can use when 210 is being reconstructed, is something that the EDA asked of staff. The EDA also will consider a revised purchase and development agreement with VCV for the industrial park land. Staff will be bringing an agenda request to the next PNF meeting for consideration consideration of the state affordable housing aid allocation. The city received this past year $96,242 and will be looking for direction on how to use that. And then finally, the final reading of the tree ordinance and policy will be held at the next meeting along with a public hearing. And staff will begin getting bids for the EAB injections. And that's everything I have.
Thank you. Mr. Langle, City Attorney.
Nothing here, thank you.
Chris Schubert, our HR Director.
Nothing in addition to my written report.
And Patrick Wassel, our Interim Public Utilities Director.
So you have my monthly staff report included in your packet. I would also note that last night we had what I considered to be a nice rain. It put me to sleep right away. But our staff were out working. We had 22 residents affected on 2 separate call-outs. And it was just what I'm going to call, again, a simple rain. And we had 22 people that had problems. Not only that, but the rain was in such a quantity in such a short period of time, we also had to call our hydro worker in because we had to let more water over the dam because we were within the response times. And that doesn't include the 2 supervisors that were involved with that too. So just making you aware of what goes on an everyday basis, and we've got good crew out there.
Thank you, Patrick. And new to the big stage, our City Administrator Broyles.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to give a quick update on the Public Utility Director position. I spoke with Jeff Weldon today. We have surpassed the first review date. I believe they have 12 applicants. So the process is still in GMP's ownership right now. As I understand it, they'll start doing their initial reviews, and they'll start going through their process of stratification and they'll conduct all the initial interviews and then they'll send us, I guess, their recommended finalists. In line with that, I just wanted to inform the council that, the group that, the group, I think there's 5 or 6 of us that are going to be on the selection group. I just want to inform council that Tad Erickson will be replacing Dolly Matten on that recruitment group, local group.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is the Honorable Mayor Dave Bedeau.
Honorable indeed. First of all, Nick, welcome to the big stage. Patrick, the interim, didn't like us, so he hid over there in the corner. I appreciate you being up here. I think it sends a good message. So, first and foremost. Secondly, Chief Davis, you took a little bit of the fun out of my next statement because I was going to talk about graffiti. I had a whole joke about getting Joe some 1972 encyclopedias so we can throw the book at him, but now that we've actually had an instance, I think we'll calm down on that joke a little bit. However, I do want to state that there has been an uptick in graffiti specifically. I was just down in Minneapolis. My daughter finished up at the University of Minnesota. I don't know if you've been to Minneapolis lately, but it is covered in graffiti. I went down there for school in college. Was not the case at the time. Now it's covered in graffiti. I don't want to see that happen up here. Mike says we don't want to be Minneapolis. That's one of the instances we don't want to be. But we had a group here in town, Team Ascension, excuse me, I say it wrong every time, martial arts group located on South 6th Street, and they actually assisted with covering up graffiti underneath the College Drive Bridge, and I just want to thank them for doing so. It had gotten to the point where you could actually see that graffiti as you were driving into town. So I just want to thank them for taking the time out of their days to go down and kind of set a good example. And just a word of warning, as the chief said, if you're going to get involved in vandalism, especially city property, those of us up here know that government stuff is not cheap. So it adds up very, very quickly. So if that's what your interest is, I would recommend against it because we're not going to spend a lot of time dealing with that. So, and then lastly, I just want to say Memorial Day came and went here in the city again, and I just want to thank all the groups that were out taking the time to present these, I wouldn't necessarily say celebrations, but these moments of pause for those that have lost their life in service of the country. So I just want to thank the groups that continually put those events on. They're pretty moving when you get to attend them, and it's just one of those things where I like when I wake up in the morning and my son says, "Where are you going?" and I say, we're going to a memorial event, and he asked me why. He's 4 years old, and he asked me why, and I said, because it's important. And that feels good. And I appreciate that the people in our area continue to put forth that effort. And also just a thank you to those that have served and have given their lives as well. End of report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up is item 12, council committee reports. Let's start with Mr. Sunick.
Nothing to say.
Terry?
I was also going to thank Team Ascension. They did a very good job. I was down there to check out their work, and very impressive, I must say. The second thing, and to build off of Chief Davis, Lighthouse Beginnings is also a part of our homeless response group, and they have been very instrumental. Since they came into business, they've housed 8 people, I believe. Is that right? 8 or 9? You think higher? So they've housed a lot of people who were experiencing homelessness. There is a flyer in our packet for a barbecue to come and see what they do and talk about all the great work that they're doing in our community. I would encourage everybody to attend. End of report.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I thought the Public Utilities meeting had a lot to offer. There's a lot going on. I won't bore you with everything. Read Patrick's report. It's an excellent report. I wanted to also thank the other staff members. I can't tell you how, like Jesse and James and, the chiefs, everybody does a wonderful job. There's so much to learn, so didn't mention Sean or Chris, but thank you. And then I did want to mention that the folks that are here regarding the crypto mining, I've seen a lot of council meetings, probably as many as you have, Mr. Bevins. And there's a lot of times people are very angry and disrespectful and they're not happy about something. And I admire the respect and the courtesy you guys have all shown at the planning and zoning, when you came here last meeting, when you're at the public utilities meeting this past last week, I should say. And it's just, I appreciate that. That's all I have.
Tiffany Stenglein.
Had a Region 5 meeting, and I looked up the official title of the resolution was a resolution to accept assistance from the National Renewable Energy Lab, but it has to do with our pooped power plan. So that was adopted, and I am very excited to say that we are moving forward with that. And I already have one other commissioner who wants to come and take a tour when it all gets put in place. So I'm excited.
You sound like it.
Thank you. Our SP&W Chair, Mike O'Day.
Yeah, I was going to address some of the graffiti myself, but I was happy to hear, sounds like Chief Davis may have already taken care of this. Usually when this happens, I think it is usually just a few individuals, but it was noticeable this time. But I was going to encourage people out there that are in those areas or have buildings in those areas. There's a lot of options right now for security cameras that are easy to put up and that could help the police department in their efforts. So I'd encourage anybody with property in general to look into it. That's all.
Thank you. And our Personnel and Finance Committee Chair, Gabe Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 things. One is Matt Delaney from Northern Lights Electrical has volunteered his master electrician expertise to install an exterior outlet at the building behind the pony field at Bain Park. So thanks to Matt at Tipton Northern Lights Electrical. I intend to get that on the park board meeting at the end of the month, and hopefully they approve the free work to make plugging in pitching machines and baseball more accessible for all the kids in the area. And then secondly, hear ye, brisket on the farm, Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 8 p.m. Come join us to learn about modern practices in today's agricultural industry and increase agricultural awareness. Brisket on the farm will feature a brisket sandwich, chips, ice cream, milk at no cost to attendees. That's at the Malloy Farm, 11306 County Road 44, Brainerd, Minnesota. I hope to see everybody there. It sounds like a great time.
Excellent. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. 7:30 a.m. right here. Stay tonight. Roll out a sleeping bag. Get a good seat. The Brainerd Economic Development Authority will be talking about crypto mining. All right. We are looking for a motion to adjourn to closed labor negotiation strategy session pursuant to Minnesota statutes 13D.03 subdivision 1B to prepare for negotiations with IBEW 31 Public Utilities and LELS unions. Is there a move? Motion by Stunek, is there a second? Second by Stengline, any discussion? Hearing none, we will take a 5-minute, is that enough?
That's fine, yeah, if you let me go first.
5-minute brief recess and reconvene at 9 o'clock.